Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest Carson's Take 5. Ryan and Sonu. Sonu, you're on location. We'll talk about where you are here in a second. It looks a little better than where I am. But we're going to talk about inflation, right? We've got lots of conflicting views, I guess is what we're going to say. Some data says it's hot. Some data says it's not. Usually the truth is somewhere in the middle. We'll get into that. But this week, we're titling this week's Take 5. We still aren't worried about inflation. But before we go there, Sonu, can we see your breakfast? You showed me. Let's see your. He's literally doing
yeah.
eat.
I'm
Now,
done with the eggs, and
okay.
they don't have a surcharge for eggs. Speaking about
Oh,
inflation
really?
here, yeah, there's no surcharge. Not yet. Not in California for whatever reason.
Okay.
If you think one place that would have a surcharge would be California, they seem to have a surcharge for everything. But it is
Yeah.
beautiful out here. It's a little foggy. I'm on the
Mm-hmm.
Pacific Coast Highway near Newport Beach, and this is one of our favorite places to come to if you're in town. The Shake Shack, Crystal Cove
Mm-hmm.
Shake Shack. That's where I am.
Yes, we've been there many times together. I think we've done these very videos there multiple
Yes.
times when I heard Sonu was there. So we got to do one. At least you're there. Now, did you get a milkshake for breakfast? They are really good
Uh,
out there.
Not
No,
quite, not quite. I did get a coffee. I may walk out with like one of those
yeah.
iced caramel lattes or something.
Well, understood. So, well, everyone, again, thanks for joining this week's Take 5. We're going to focus on inflation. I mean, Sonu, lots of ways to start this. I guess let's start here. We've seen some of the consumer data, Michigan consumer data, or University of Michigan
University of Michigan.
consumer sentiment showed a big jump in inflation expectations. The Consumer Confidence Board came out with a big jump in consumer expectations. But the other side of it is small businesses. If you look at the Atlanta Fed, really no jump in inflation expectations. What's the true story here?
Yeah, the problem with consumer expectations of inflation, like with a lot of other things in life right now, it's colored by
Mm-hmm.
politics. So if you
Yeah.
ask Democrats, they expect a massive surge in inflation. They expect inflation to be close to like 4 or 5%, right? Which
Right.
is crazy to think about. Like that's talking about energy prices going back to, let's say, $5 a gallon for gas, things like that, right?
It's
So
probably not
close
much
to
in California right now, though. I
right.
would guess.
For that matter, even in Chicago. Well, in Chicago, it's about
Yeah.
350, 360 or
Okay.
something like that.
There you go.
But still, that's what we'd be talking about,
Right.
right? It's almost like, if you ask Democrats, we're expecting inflation and a recession. So that's almost like stagflation. And let's be
Okay.
clear, we're nowhere close to that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, just no. And then if you ask Republicans, they expect over the next year negative inflation. And over the
Negative. Yeah.
next 5 years, they expect 1% inflation or something like that. The only way we're getting any sort of inflation numbers that look negative, or even 1% over the next 5 years, is if we have a deep recession where demand
Mm,
falls, nobody was
right.
buying anything. That's why the price of goods fall. That's the scenario we'd be. So the irony is Republicans are predicting a deflationary recession. I'm sure this is not what they're actually thinking
No.
about when asked about inflation expectations. And Democrats are predicting a stagflationary scenario. Let's be clear, we don't expect either of these. You look at
Mm-hmm.
independents, inflation expectations still slightly elevated, but obviously egg prices, things like that, are more salient.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at business expectations, right, and businesses are concerned about, the prices that go into their, cost of goods, things like that, and they want to maintain margins as well. They're not that worried about inflation, right? If you look at business expectations from the Atlanta Federal Reserve survey, it looks similar to where it was over the past decade before COVID. So I think, inflation expectations, where it really matters and where you can really take a signal from, that's still muted. That's consistent with, the Fed's target of 2% inflation.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. The Michigan consumer, University of Michigan, consumer survey showed 1 month inflation jumped 1% from 3.3% to 4.3%. Only the fifth time in 14 years we saw a jump like that. And then the Conference Board also does a survey similar to this. Where is it here? The largest jump, largest jump in 3 years. Largest jump in 3 years, expecting
Well,
inflation about 6% 1 year from now. Again, a lot of this is politics, but then, like you said, the Atlanta Fed now coming in is about 3.3%. It was 3.2% last month. And that, again, looks at small businesses. And historically, everyone, small businesses do a much, much, much better job of predicting
mhm.
potential future, honestly, economic growth, but also inflation. So, like, usually the truth is somewhere in the middle. But, what does this matter to a listener, right? That's what we need to talk about next. If we see higher expectations for inflation, to a degree, Sonu, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I know the 70s and 80s, we saw some of that. And the
Yes.
Fed cares what the consumer thinks, right?
Right, because if I'm expecting prices to go up, I'm going to my employer and saying, you know what,
Hmm.
you got to raise my wages. When you raise wages, then, I may go out and spend more. That's the theory, right? And that pushes up
Hmm.
prices more if I spend more. That's what happened in the 70s and 80s. I mean, that's what the models say happened, right? I have my own gripes with that. That's a different thing. We won't get into that. But that's what the Fed's worried about. If inflation expectations on the consumer side start to surge, they'll ask for raises, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy with respect to actual inflation, realized inflation. But look, the reality is the job market is easing. It's not in trouble by itself. But look, quit rates are falling, which means that there is more slack in the labor market. It's harder to
Yeah.
find a job. Layoffs are low, so if you have a job, you're in a good place. Wages are going up fairly strong, similar to what we saw in 2019. But if you don't have a job, it's gotten that much harder to find a new one, which means, I don't think workers are in a position to go demand large wage increases from their, employers. And that gets back to the fact that I'm not really concerned about inflation expectations. I don't think the Fed is probably too concerned right now, which is not to say they're not keeping an eye on this. They're probably looking at the business expectations as well. But for now, actual inflation numbers, we know over the rest of this year,
Hmm.
barring no surprises, anything like that, it should continue to fall, get closer to
Hmm.
the Fed's target of 2%. And speaking of the Fed, I think we're still on track to see maybe 2 to 3 more interest rate cuts. It may just come on the back half of the year.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of those concepts again. That inflation, if you kind of peel back that onion, so to speak, shelter, auto insurance, some other factors are causing really big jumps in inflation, but lots of other parts of the inflation baskets are actually just
Right.
fine, right? And improving by a good deal. We think that'll continue to be the case. So listen, Sonu's food is getting cold. You're out there in beautiful California with the Pacific behind you. Hopefully you enjoy. What do you say you have? It's
There
French
you go.
toast, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
French toast. That's what I have to finish up now. Right now, I'm going to take my time and.
And he sent me a picture of his dinner last night. Let's just say it was a wonderful looking steak. I don't even know what I had for dinner last night, running kids around a basketball. It was not a steak like you had. But listen, everyone, thank you for listening to the latest Carson's Take 5. A lot of worries about inflation out there, but we still aren't worried about inflation as of right now. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Take care.